But there's one question I can't shake. Where did that marble actually go? I'm Kim, and this is Hung Channel. Do you know about the strange legend of the 7 fox faces that once appeared on a marble wall in Causeway Bay? What if those shapes were never just patterns in stone, but something watching, waiting to be seen? By the end of this journey, you'll understand why an entire city gathered to stare at a wall, and why some people believed those faces were more than just imagination. Chapter 1: The Cultural Roots of the Fox Spirit. Urban legends in Hong Kong have never been merely stories meant to frighten. They often act like a mirror, reflecting humanity's fear of the unknown, its attachment to social customs, and the psychological atmosphere unique to each era. Among the many supernatural elements, the fox spirit is undoubtedly one of the most culturally profound. In Chinese history and folk belief, foxes have long been imbued with spirituality. Since ancient times, people have both revered and feared them. In some regions, foxes are regarded as mountain spirits, believed to bring blessings when worshipped. Yet, at the same time, countless tales depict them as beings that bewitch the human heart and drain one's vital essence, making them creatures that exist ambiguously between good and evil. In the Qing Dynasty novel Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio, fox spirits are often portrayed as entities capable of transforming into human form. Sometimes they are gentle and affectionate, even forming emotional bonds with humans. But there are also stories in which foxes infiltrate the human world, influencing people with their supernatural aura, and becoming associated with illness and death. Among these, the belief that foxes steal the lives of infants is particularly chilling. Folk tradition holds that foxes may disguise themselves as women, approach households, and secretly absorb the life force of children, causing sudden and fatal illness. For this reason, the fox spirit is not merely a supernatural image, but a symbol of temptation and forces beyond human control. When this ancient motif enters a modern urban space, it can evolve into a new form of urban legend. Chapter 2: The Beginning of the Causeway Bay Phenomenon. The story moves to 1980s Hong Kong, a time of rapid economic growth. Causeway Bay, as one of the most bustling commercial districts on Hong Kong Island, was filled with dense crowds. Department stores and office buildings represented the city's modern transformation. At the time, Windsor House, completed in 1979, stood as a major landmark in the area. Its exterior walls and lobby were lined with polished marble, smooth, pale, and flowing with natural patterns that appeared especially luminous under artificial lighting. Yet it was precisely these natural veins that became the origin of the entire incident. One day, a passerby happened to look up and noticed that a section of the marble wall near the entrance seemed to form the outline of an animal's face. The shape was strange: pointed ears, and elongated snout. At first, only 1 or 2 people noticed it, but as word spread, more and more people began to stop and stare. Soon, some claimed that there was not just one face, but several. Some said they saw 5, others said 7. Eventually, the story evolved into what became known as Seven Foxes at the Gate. Seven fox-like faces seemingly embedded above the building's entrance. As lunchtime crowds and after-school students gathered, the atmosphere intensified. People began pointing out shapes to one another, trying to identify matching forms within the marble's patterns. A wall that had once been completely ordinary suddenly became the focus of the entire city. Chapter 3: Media and the Power of Collective Perception. As the crowds continued to grow, the media quickly stepped in. Newspapers published attention-grabbing headlines such as "Fox Faces in Marble," "Seven Foxes at the Gate," and an ominous sign, rapidly amplifying public interest. In Hong Kong, during the 1970s and 1980s, superstition was widespread. In an era before the internet, newspapers and television were the primary sources of information. Once the media framed something as a supernatural phenomenon, the public was far more likely to interpret it through a mystical lens rather than a rational one. At the same time, Feng Shui masters began offering interpretations. Some claimed that foxes belonged to yin energy, and that the number 7 symbolized misfortune associated with financial loss, bloodshed, and disaster. These interpretations spread quickly among the public, further intensifying the sense of unease. More importantly, a phenomenon of collective observation began to form. When one person pointed out a spot that looked like a fox face, others would search the same area and begin to perceive similar shapes. This psychological effect is known as collective cognitive reinforcement. When enough people believe something, it becomes psychologically real. Thus, what began as vague and abstract marble patterns gradually became defined and solidified through group perception, eventually transforming into 7 clearly visible fox faces. Urban legends are born precisely through this process of collective participation and amplification. Chapter 4: 3 Major Supernatural Rumors. At the time, rumors spread everywhere. Among them, 3 stories became the most widely circulated, repeated endlessly in neighborhoods, newspaper stands, and tea houses. The first rumor: it was said that a full-month banquet had once been held at a restaurant on the top floor of the building, attended by many guests. However, someone claimed that the family had failed to offer wine to the fox spirits or burn incense at the entrance as a sign of respect. A few days after the banquet, the infant suddenly fell ill, with a mysterious fever that would not subside, and eventually passed away. The story quickly spread, interpreted as the wrath of the fox spirits, who had taken the child's life during a moment of celebration. The second rumor: one night in the early hours of the morning, a security guard finishing his shift walked past the marble wall. Suddenly, he heard faint crying, like that of an infant, yet also like the wind, distant and shifting. He stopped and looked at the wall. In the dim lighting, the hollow eye sockets of the 7 fox faces seemed to glow faintly red. Terrified, he turned and ran. The next day, he resigned immediately. The third rumor was even more unsettling. It was said that the building's management, in an attempt to nurture goodwill, had set up a small playground on the rooftop, complete with swings, slides, and rocking horses, supposedly for the fox spirits to use. During the day, the area was locked behind iron gates, but late at night, residents in nearby buildings claimed to occasionally see faint silhouettes of children gently swaying on the swings. There was no sound, no laughter, only an image like the final flicker of a television screen before it shuts off. Chapter 5: The removal of the marble and the survival of the legend. As the rumors intensified, the number of visitors grew daily. The entrance of the building became constantly blocked, making it difficult for tenants to enter and exit. Security staff struggled to maintain order. Some shop owners began to worry about the impact on business and reputation. There were even reports of tenants considering relocation. Under this pressure, both commercial and public, the management ultimately decided to take action by removing the source of the phenomenon, the marble wall itself. According to reports at the time, the building arranged for construction workers to dismantle the wall in the presence of journalists and the public. On that day, a large crowd gathered. Some brought cameras, others watched from a distance. The entire scene resembled a public ritual. A crane slowly lifted into position as workers used the drills and tools to break apart the marble. The sound of cracking stone echoed throughout the lobby. The entire slab was eventually removed, covered, and taken away. This act carried strong symbolic meaning, a physical attempt to cut off the source of the legend. As the wall was replaced, the crowds gradually dispersed, and media coverage began to fade. Yet, the story did not disappear. Even after the physical object was gone, 7 voxes at the gate continued to be told and retold among the public. Years later, Windsor House was redeveloped into Windsor Plaza, with its exterior replaced by glass curtain walls. But the legend remained embedded in the city's memory. Chapter 6: Psychology and the True Nature of Fear. In psychology, there is a well-known concept called pareidolia, the tendency of the human brain to perceive familiar patterns, especially faces within random stimuli. The lateral patterns of marble are filled with irregular lines and shifting shadows. As lighting conditions change, these patterns appear differently. This visual characteristic makes it easy for people to perceive shapes that resemble something familiar. Once the first person points out a fox face, others unconsciously begin searching for similar shapes in the same location. As more people confirm seeing the same image, individuals become more convinced that what they see is real. Eventually, a once ambiguous pattern becomes clear and defined through collective perception. Furthermore, Hong Kong in the 1980s was a time when traditional beliefs and modern urban culture coexisted. Concepts such as feng shui, the supernatural, and scientific thinking intertwined, leaving people both skeptical and sensitive toward the unknown. Media exaggeration, combined with large crowds, further amplified this psychological effect. Today, Causeway Bay remains brightly lit and bustling. The marble wall no longer exists, yet the story continues to circulate. Perhaps what truly unsettles us was never the pattern on the wall, but the moment you begin to wonder whether you really saw something there. I'm Kim. Please subscribe, like, and share. And stay with me. You will never face the dark unknown.